Welcome to the MSME Radio Network. The broadcast shows are for informational and entertainment purposes only. They are not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, or counseling advice. Individuals with a medical issue should always consult their healthcare provider. MSME is not responsible for content of individual shows. The views expressed by show host or the guest are their own. Enjoy the show.
I'm John Strum, and this is RealTalk MS. It's May 29th, and we have a lot to talk about today. I've invited a very special guest to talk about the subject that I've received by far the most requests to discuss on the podcast, and that's sexual function and MS. So we'll be getting to that conversation. Tomorrow is World MS Day, and we'll be talking about that as well. And we're kicking off our contest where you can win an Amazon Dot. But first, I want to give you a quick update on a couple of important conferences. Last week, I was at the International Progressive MS Alliance Third Scientific Congress in Toronto, Canada, where the theme was Progressive MS, Making a Difference Through Rehabilitation and Symptom Management. And I hope you got the chance to listen to the podcast episodes that we did from that conference. If you haven't, I'll recommend that you check the podcast archives and listen to episodes 35 and 36. You'll hear from some amazing MS innovators and researchers, and I think they are definitely worth your time. Tomorrow, I'm heading to Nashville, Tennessee for the annual meeting of the Consortium of Multiple Sclerosis Centers. And, attending these conferences not only gives me an opportunity to meet some of the leading MS research scientists and hear about new and innovative research, but you can't come away from events like these without feeling truly enriched by the experience. As far as these particular conferences go, I have the honor of not only attending, but of participating as a presenter. So I'll be in Nashville talking about what it's like when a very aggressive case of progressive MS comes calling. It's a bit like describing a train wreck that happens in slow motion. Massive damage that continually and exponentially accumulates over a period of years, and no one walks away unscathed. By the way, if you're curious, you can hear that story firsthand by listening to the very first episode of this podcast, where I kind of explain how I got here and why the podcast is so important to me. And that brings me to the other reason behind why I find so much value in attending these conferences. It's learning about the incredible effort that's being made every day on the part of so many to prevent future train wrecks from impacting other families. It's not just the information, it's the inspiration that I take away. It's seeing the passion and commitment to solve the riddle of multiple sclerosis that's so evident in these researchers and clinicians. It's hearing the powerful advocacy being voiced by people living with MS, and it's witnessing firsthand the unwavering dedication of the people and organizations around the world who go to work every single day with the goal of putting multiple sclerosis in the rearview mirror. You can't help but feel hopeful. And when it comes to progressive MS, I don't have to tell you that there hasn't always been a lot to be hopeful about. Personally, I'm proud to say that the International Progressive MS Alliance has been a driving force in fundamentally changing that. In just a few years, the Alliance has impacted the progressive MS research agenda, not only making progressive MS research a major part of the worldwide MS research conversation, but funding important and promising global research initiatives and continually influencing the direction and purpose of progressive MS research. You can find out more about the Alliance by visiting their website at www.progressivemsalliance.org, and I'll have a link to the website in today's show notes. One of the very significant highlights of last week's Scientific Congress was that the Alliance announced its future strategies in solving progressive MS. The Alliance's next steps are aimed at broadening and deepening the understanding of progression, accelerating clinical trials to better fill the drug development pipeline, and focusing the field of rehabilitation and wellness to develop programs and strategies designed to enhance the well-being and improve the quality of life for people living with progressive MS. So there's a lot to digest when we drill down into these strategic goals, and we'll be talking about these initiatives in future podcast episodes. But the one thing that I want to mention today is what I consider to be the importance of the Progressive MS Alliance adding rehabilitation and wellness and the concepts of well-being and quality of life to the research objectives already reflected in their strategic goals. Certainly, everyone's ultimate goal is ending multiple sclerosis, but until there's a cure, it's rehabilitation and symptom management that really determine the day-to-day quality of life for people living with MS. And sometimes rehabilitation gets labeled as a softer science. There isn't a specific molecule to discover or explore. And sometimes outcomes associated with wellness are more challenging to quantify. But for people living with MS, those outcomes aren't hard to qualify at all, and they're incredibly important. So I couldn't be happier to see rehabilitation and wellness recognized. In fact, they comprised the theme of the Alliance's Scientific Congress last week and are now a part of the Alliance's strategic goals moving forward. And that's really good news for people living with progressive MS. World MS Day is tomorrow, and since 2009, when the MS International Federation started it, World MS Day has been the day when the global MS community has come together to share their stories and raise awareness about multiple sclerosis. This year, World MS Day is being celebrated in over 100 countries around the world, and there's still time for you to get involved. You can start by visiting the World MS Day website at www.worldmsday.org, and we'll include a link to their website in today's show notes. And at their website, you can easily search for World MS Day events that are happening near you, and there are events happening everywhere, from the United States to Russia to South Korea, Thailand, South Africa, Iran, Turkey, Finland, the UK, Spain, France, Mexico. I think you'll be hard-pressed to find a country where there aren't World MS Day events taking place. You'll also be able to download posters and flyers, and they have a whole collection of images, banners, and animations that you can use in your social media posts tomorrow. So take advantage of the worldwide spotlight that's going to be focused on raising awareness about MS, and add your voice. This year, the theme of World MS Day is Bringing Us Closer. So be sure to add hashtag Bringing Us Closer to all of the tweets, Instagram posts, and videos that you share tomorrow. If you're a regular listener to the podcast, then you know I've been talking about the RealTalk MS Alexa skill. If you own an Amazon Echo or Dot or any Alexa-enabled device, it's the best way to listen to the podcast by far. With nothing more than your voice, you can go back to previous podcast episodes and binge listen. You can fast forward or rewind anywhere within a podcast episode. So if a researcher is talking about some really interesting research that you want to make sure you got down right, you can listen to it again easily. But the feature that I find most useful is that you can pause the podcast, come back to it in a few hours or a few days, and pick up right where you left off. And to do all that, just say, Alexa, enable the RealTalk MS podcast. And, this is something that's not only convenient. If you have any challenges when it comes to using a PC or a Mac or a mouse or a phone or a keyboard, then these devices can be game changers. With just your voice, Alexa can assist you in turning on the lights at home, adjusting the heat or air conditioning, making phone calls to friends or family members, even ordering pizza or an Uber. A couple of weeks ago, I also mentioned that we're going to be giving away an Amazon Dot, and that contest starts today. So if you'd like to be entered to win an Amazon Dot, all you have to do is leave a simple, honest review about the podcast, and then you have to let me know that you've done that. So here's the easiest way to get all that done. First, visit www.realtalkms.com/contest. That's going to take you to the iTunes page for the Real Talk MS podcast. Click on the blue button on the left-hand side that says View in iTunes. If you're prompted to launch iTunes, click the Launch Application button. From there, click on Ratings and Reviews, and then click on the Write a Review button. A pop-up window is going to open, and all you have to do is leave a simple, honest review about the podcast, give your review a simple title, write a short text review, give us a rating from 1 to 5 stars, with 5 stars being the best, and click Submit. Now, all you have left to do is let me know that you've submitted that review. So send an email to contest@realtalkms.com and make sure you include your email address and whatever name you left your review under. We'll send you an email letting you know that you're officially entered in the contest, and I'll be announcing the winner on the podcast on June 26th. Someone's going to win an Amazon Dot, so best of luck to everybody. Today, I have a special guest on the podcast to talk about what has been the most requested subject that I get asked to discuss. The topic is sexual function and MS, and my guest is Stuart Nixon. Stuart is an ambassador for the MS Society in the United Kingdom. He's been recognized with a Lifetime Achievement Award from the MS Society in the UK, and the Queen has recognized his efforts in raising awareness about MS by designating him a member of the British Empire. In a moment, Stuart is going to share some very open and honest thoughts on sexual function and multiple sclerosis. My guest on the podcast this week is Stuart Nixon, MBE, and we'll get to that particular MBE designation in just a moment. Stuart's lived with MS for over 30 years, and after serving as vice chair, trustee, and volunteer for the MS Society in the UK for more than 20 years, Stuart now serves as an ambassador of the MS Society. As co-chair of the MS Society's Research Strategy Committee, Stuart's committed to the concept that research is a key to solving multiple sclerosis, and he underscored that commitment in 2013 when he completed a 60-kilometer challenge around London. And for my listeners here in the States, that's just over 37 miles. It was called Stu Steps Up, and in the process of completing that challenge, Stuart raised over 74,000 pounds for MS research. In recognition of his commitment to the MS community, Stuart received the MS Society's Lifetime Achievement Award in 2013, and in 2014, Stuart was honored by his country when he was designated as a member of the British Empire for his long time and far-reaching service to people with MS. And that's what that very special MBE designation is all about. Stuart, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, John. Great to be here.
You know, I invited you to join me today to talk about a specific subject, but before we do, I wanted to first ask about something else. You know, here in the United States, the public policy issues that are of particular interest to people living with multiple sclerosis are making sure that everyone has access to quality, affordable health care, and making sure that MS prescription medications are affordable for everyone. Both of these issues are far less regulated here in the United States compared to any other Western nation. And both of those issues can have a profound impact on almost every aspect of someone's quality of life, from their financial health to their physical and emotional well-being. So I was hoping you could tell us what the biggest public policy issues are for people living with MS in the UK.
It's funny you talk about regulation. In the UK, we are really lucky, and we've got the National Health Service, which undertakes to make sure that healthcare is available free at the source of delivery to everybody living in UK. And that sounds an absolutely idyllic position. I'm afraid that the truth of it with regard to MS is slightly different. Although we are all eligible, to receive disease-modifying medications, unfortunately, what we do find is that locally, the health bodies do make significant decisions around who can access and how much money is available to make people or allow people to take these medications. So whilst we do formally have a system which says anybody who fits the criteria for these drugs will be able to access them, the reality is often that the number of people who can take these medications is slightly reduced. What we tend to find is that NICE, which is our body called the National Institute for Care Excellence, that makes the decisions on drug availability, will often put in place hurdles that people have to cross, which are a little bit spurious, a little bit various when it comes to the original diagnostic criteria that people have to cross. So what we see is that often, although these drugs should be available, the reality shows that lots of people still do not get access. So John, when you say you have enormous issues in the US, which I certainly recognise, I don't think that everything's rosy on this side of the Atlantic either. We have issues when it comes to getting broad prescription for the full range of maybe 11 or 13 registered medications that are out there.
So access to medication still remains an issue on the table for you as well as for people in the U.S.
Absolutely, I think so. I think one of the other areas that's of interest is the access to physical therapies in the way of physiotherapy, occupational therapy. And there I think we have a far better and far stronger approach in that all these medications or all these treatments are available in local hospitals, and they're also available throughout the community. What we tend to use in the UK, we describe as a hub and spoke approach. So we have centres of excellence which may serve a population density of, I'm going to take a bit of a guesstimate at this, but maybe in the region of 1 million people, maybe more. So the centre of the hub has really high quality, highly experienced staff, whereas then on the periphery in your local area, you may well be treated by somebody who has less of an interest, if you will, less of a commitment or skill set based specifically in MS. So it is available, you get good treatment, but sometimes you may have to travel to access the very best treatment.
Are there any other public policy issues that you feel are facing people living with MS in the UK that might be unique or maybe just surprising as that was to the rest of us?
I think one of the big issues for me, the availability of support to modify your living area. In the UK, we have a thing called the Disabled Facilities Grant, which is a grant given to disabled people so that they can be assisted in modifying their property or wherever they're living so that it suits their needs It might be about putting stair lifts in, it might be about wet rooms, it might be about level access. And unfortunately what we see is that certainly since the 2008 crash, the amount of money available has been vastly reduced. I mean, you get an example, someone like myself, I simply wanted to put a wet room and convert my garage for myself and my wife to sleep in. That probably was going to cost about maybe about £15,000 pounds. So I applied for a disability facilities grant, and wonderful. I was received within 6 weeks a letter telling me, Stuart, you've got 100% disabled facilities grant available for your use. After an initial personal spend of £78,000. So as soon as I'd spent £78,000, they would pay everything else. That to me doesn't feel like a very positive way of supporting disabled people. All I needed was a portion of £10,000. If they'd given me, if they'd given me £5,000, that would have helped me.
In other words, for a renovation that was going to cost £15,000, your response that you received was, we will absolutely cover that once you've paid the first £78,000 of it. Is that correct?
Absolutely. The other interesting portion of that is I'm lucky enough that I do work. So what they've done, I guess, is taken into account the fact that I have an income. What they said was, well, if you stop working, we'll pay for the whole thing. Sorry, John, but we have a government here who is committed to inclusion of disabled people in society. Now, that doesn't feel like inclusion to me.
Thank you for sharing that. My jaw just about dropped. But I said I wanted to speak with you about a specific subject. It's a subject that's very quickly become the most listener requested topic on the podcast, and the subject is sex and intimacy in MS. In requesting that we talk about this topic, one of my listeners said, and I'm quoting now, sex and intimacy in MS is the thing that everybody with MS thinks about, but nobody's talking about. Well, I can only point out that sex and intimacy issues are also the things that everybody thinks about, but nobody's talking about among people who aren't living with multiple sclerosis. So I'm hoping you and we can break the mold right now and get into this. So what about sex and intimacy in MS? Is it the thing that everybody thinks about but nobody's talking about?
It is, and I don't think this is an issue just for you in the US. My wife Mary and I, at our MS convention, which is called MS Life, we asked with a couple of our colleagues if we could run a session on sex and intimacy. And we were maybe reluctantly told we could have a little room at the back, and we toddled off to deliver our little session to 20 or 30 folks. And the stewards had to close the doors when there were 75 people in the room. 75 people who were desperate to have some sort of conversation about sex and intimacy, because it's not something that anybody will talk about. And I think that told me, that was the first session we did. We've done probably 10 sessions since then, and everyone is always oversubscribed because people are desperate for this information and desperate just to be heard, to be able to, tell their story. And they might not get an answer to it, but they want to be able to tell their story and explore the issue.
So, what sorts of things are the people who are coming to your sessions most interested in? Are there a few topics that seem to be generic to the conversation? What are those issues that people want to explore?
I guess I have to nail my colours to the mast a bit here, because what I'll say is one of the big things that always comes up is the issue of erectile dysfunction. People still are not getting access to a lot of the medications that they need. And if they are getting access, to my mind, they're being offered possibly the least appropriate drug. I think all of us are now very familiar with Viagra, and having used it, it's a great drug, brilliant, but it is not, to my mind, a lifestyle. It's not, to me, a drug for someone who has long-term erectile dysfunction. And I say that simply because it has a half-life. It has an action time between half an hour and an hour. So the way I tend to do this when I'm doing it, talk like this when I'm doing it on the stage. Oh, right, okay, well, just let me take my tablet. I'll take my tablet and I'll sit around, wait for 20 minutes till it works, starts to work, and then, okay, we're off now. We've only got an hour tops. That doesn't seem, John, to me, like a particularly normal approach to sexual relations. To me, what I want to have is something which offers me a level playing field. It puts me back to where I was, prior to having issues with ED. Now, Viagra doesn't offer you that. But there are other drugs out there. The one that comes to my mind first off is a drug called Cialis, which has a 48-hour half-life. It doesn't give you an erection, but it means that you're in a position where when aroused, you will get a far stronger response. But because it has a 48-hour half-life, you can take it in a small daily dose, have that more normal approach, or more normal response to sexual interaction and sexual stimulation. And unfortunately, in the UK, it's very difficult to get Cialis.
ED is physiological, and as you've just pointed out, there are specific medications that can help resolve that kind of a barrier to a more normal sex life. But there are other things, and I'm wondering if they come up in your conversations and your sessions that you hold. Maybe a certain despondency about someone with MS having to become more reliant on their partner as their caregiver, their self-esteem issues, body image issues, all of that. Are these things that you also get into?
We get into that an awful lot. The commonest issue is around the changing relationship, the change in the dynamic of a relationship. Again, you'll often hear people talk about being best friends, being lovers, and that's the basis of their relationship. Unfortunately, a life with MS can start to introduce the third, another aspect there, which is caregiving. So it becomes very challenging sometimes when you are either the receiver or the giver, because both of those are very difficult scenarios. So if you become the caregiver, you are very much involved in intimate and often not very nice things that you're having to do and support your partner with. And as the person who's cared for, you have enormous issues about your your virility, your self-esteem, your position in the world, the relationship that you're having with your partner. Because, how can I be this, wonderful, dynamic, sexual beast that I used to be, when actually, I might have to catheterize 2 or 3 times a day. I might not be able to move. I might need to be dressed. I might need to put my bum wiped and whatever have you. All of those issues are enormous as far as somebody's self-esteem, and trying to maintain a positive approach to life is extremely challenging.
So what is the prescribed path to reaching a better place with your partner when you find yourselves thrust into the role of caregiver or the person they're caring for?
For me, the thing I tend to use, and I don't know if this works as well in the US as it works here in the UK, it's about buying houses. Now that might seem a bit daft, John, but here in the UK, when we say we are looking at buying houses and going out and setting up our life, we say there are only 3 things that matter. And that's location, location, and location. And the reason that works for me with sex and MS is there are only 3 things that matter when it comes to that change in relationship, that challenge of self-esteem. And those 3 things are communication, communication, and communication. It is all about talking. It's all about trying to have those really challenging, really difficult conversations where you can share with your partner what your challenges are, what your issues are, how you're feeling. And that is really, really hard. And one of the things that I find people will often do is they say, right, well, let's have a truth hour. So set up a time with your partner when it might be an hour, it might be half an hour, where you say, right, now we're going to sit down, just the 2 of us, and have a conversation about the truth, about the issues, our feelings, where we're coming from, what our challenges are. So you can talk about your lack of self-esteem. You can talk about what it feels like. And by doing that, lots of people will find that if you say, right, well, we'll do that once a week. So they have that half hour, an hour once a week. And suddenly, 2 months down the line, that hour is gone. They don't use it anymore. Because what they've done is they've actually started to be able to communicate all the time. So start by giving yourself that little bit of time where you are saying, we are now going to be honest with each other. That would be one of the suggestions I would offer to folks, to say, develop that communication that you need.
I think we're going to have a few thousand people who are going to be hearing this conversation, wanting very much to be in the next small room that they try to put you in when you talk about these things. I think your insights are priceless. It's so tricky.
Sorry, I was just going to say, the one thing I would say, I'd hate anybody to think, oh, Stu's just sitting there saying this and thinks it's easy. It's the hardest thing you will probably ever have to do. It is really, really difficult. If you set your mind to it, you set yourself that challenge, and you realise what the goal is, what benefit you can see from it. It is such a worthwhile investment in you and your relationship.
Well, it's particularly tricky trying to solve a problem that not everyone is particularly comfortable talking about. So we're going to be extending the conversation with future guests on the podcast, and hopefully our conversations can lead to better conversations for everyone.
And as you pointed out, communication is where it begins. Thank you for stepping up and starting the ball rolling on what is very clearly an important conversation that people need to be having. Thanks for joining me today.
More than a pleasure, John. Thank you.
And that's going to wrap up what feels like a really full podcast episode. Don't forget to visit realtalkms.com/contest and enter to win an Amazon Dot. Have an amazing World MS Day tomorrow. I'm off to Nashville for the Consortium of MS Centers annual meeting. My name is John Strum. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.